Yeah, I think it's perfectly fine to change things up, to recast people, to make characters look different, because representation really does matter so much, especially when you see it with these are characters we're not even talking about right now. We're talking about characters for kids. These are, with Scooby Doo and The Little Mermaid, the target audience is the little children.
Yeah,
And when you're almost like catching them that young and showing them this diverse group of characters as far
that's
as,
all
who
they
can
know.
play, yeah, you're kind of exposing it to them early so they
Yeah.
don't feel like left out. I'm sure there were like kids growing up back in the 90s or 80s when the original movies or cartoons were aired. They might have just seen, like, I don't see anyone who looks like me on the screen right now. I don't feel represented. They don't think in those terms then, but it's obviously felt throughout, childhood and then growing up. But this generation is fortunate. It's nice to see the companies kind of taking it on themselves to do this. No one's asking them to, and obviously there's going to be people who oppose it.
Yeah.
Case in point, Velma. Like, we can focus on Velma for a second because
Yeah.
I thought that was so funny that somehow this character's sexuality, which is a kid's character, that's not. I don't ever remember watching Scooby Doo and thinking to myself, I wonder who are they attracted to,
Yeah.
and that's not the priority of the cartoon, but somehow this is the hot topic of the day. I don't
You
get it,
know,
but
what's really interesting is that I think it really is about the fact that people are not okay with change. Um,
especially today, but that's what's happening everywhere. Is they're trying to be more inclusive, and there's this
yeah,
friction.
yeah, because I mean, this was the same conversation, right? It's about when Disney. I mean, I want to talk about Luca that came out a couple of months ago, and I thought it was such a fantastic film from Disney. And
Mhm.
what was funny about that film is like people were mad at both ends. There were people who were like more conservative. They're like, oh my god, they were like trying to like make assume that there was something going on between the two boys who were shown in that animated movie. And then there was like people who are liberal and they're like, why didn't they commit to it? Like they should have
Yeah,
shown the kids that they're gay. Like why did it's like it's and it did seem like it's like the person who directed the movie went there and then thought maybe it's not safe enough and took a few steps back.
yeah.
And my thing
This
is
is
the kids, like, they had affection for each other. I think that came out beautifully in the movie, and that's let it be. But what's kind of sad is, you look at any of the other movies that have come out, be it Cinderella or Snow White and stuff, and at the end, the prince and the princess, they're kissing, and that has been completely fine. But the moment it's suggested that they're two boys who might like each other, it's like, oh my god, the world is falling apart.
it's sad because then there's somewhere out there's a little boy who might have felt that way, and then
Yeah,
actually sees it on screen and sees a depiction of someone who could be like him represented. That's it. Like,
yeah,
you don't have to do more than that. You just have to show that it's possible, and that's the one way most kids consume media is through cartoons and all
absolutely.
these Disney movies when you're growing up. So to see that diversity, it maybe this is the start of something. This is how it starts, and then it grows into a more open dialogue or an open character who's
Yeah.
portrayed a certain way, and like it's very obvious that that's what they're trying to say instead of the subtle messaging. This is maybe the gateway to that. Um, the other part of it is even with race. We were
Yep.
talking about some of the Marvel movies and the Avenger movies specifically, but the original character Nick Fury was supposed to be white
A white guy.
in the comic books,
Yeah.
and turn of the century 2000, they decided that it's time for a recast in the comic books, where they now this character is black, and was then played by Samuel L. Jackson in the movies, and there was outrage over just when the comic books decided to change things up, and they're like, why do you want to change this? This is not how it's supposed to be. This is what we grew up
Yeah.
with. And there's that weird nostalgia holding on to something that it's nice that you had that, but you're also then dismissing what this change serves. You know, the purpose that is
Yes,
served through changing the character up. Now there's going to be a little black kid somewhere who sees a Nick Fury and is like, that's possible.
everything is a function of time. Like today, I cannot imagine anybody play Nick Fury outside of Samuel L. Jackson, let alone any other race, because it's just such an iconic character now. In
Mm,
the Marvel, it's like an essential part, right? But yeah, I mean, sexuality, being changed for animated movies or race. And then we've seen a lot of, all of these franchises that have been playing with gender,
mm,
where we have, they're not the best examples, but like the Ghostbusters, the revamp came in with women. Then even the Oceans series, Oceans 8, was a complete mix of just women. Uh,
mm,
they kind of bombed at the box office, so it's not the best example. And I guess a huge part of that was because they focused in more on the gender than the story. Both times it
mm.
was like touted as, oh, it's an all female lead cast. And it's like
Mm.
somewhere that became bigger than the story itself, so it suffered. But um, I'm all for it. I mean, if you can transition that seamlessly and blend in with the story, change is fine. What
Yeah,
I will say is that we should learn to respect the past and be okay with changing the present. I mean, the whole thing about The Simpsons, right? Like the way Apu has been shown on the TV show has been controversial, and I get it. But to go back and say Apu should be removed and Apu shouldn't be like, it's like, dude, are you kidding me? You're gonna change like decades of The Simpsons? Yeah, be mindful of how you represent, say, a certain community on the show henceforth. But to ask the entire thing be revamped is, to me, it's just unrealistic.
yeah. I think with that one, it was. I don't know about the whether they actually went ahead and removed Apu from the previous episodes that he'd been on. He's a
No.
famous character at this point, so it's really hard
Yeah.
to do that. But I do know that Hank Azaria, the person who was doing the voice of Apu,
Voicing. Yeah.
he actually came out and said that he was not comfortable doing the voice anymore. He himself, no one asked him, no one put pressure on him.
Yeah.
I think it was his kids. He was speaking with his kids, and it came across that I think his kids might have had, classmates who were Indian or something like that along those lines, where he was suddenly aware of this negative portrayal that he was doing and
Yeah.
putting out there. And then he himself said, I'm not going to do any more of this. And they had to respect that because he actually voices a lot of characters on
A
that
lot
show.
of characters on The Simpsons. Yeah.
Yeah, but he
Yeah.
refused to do Apu anymore. And that was the end of that character. So I can respect that, where I think people should be given the opportunity to change their mind.
Yeah.
Maybe you believe it was funny in the beginning, and then you're like, no, this is not funny to me anymore. That's fine.
It's growth.
I don't. Yeah, because it's it's hard to go and fix everything that was considered appropriate back in the 80s and the 70s and suddenly say today it's not appropriate, so let's go and cancel everything that happened back then.
Yeah.
That's next to impossible to do, and I don't even see the point really in trying to overdo it in that sense.
I mean, I
But
personally love Apu. I mean, he's supposed to be funny, and it is cringe, but it's
yeah.
like he's just iconic. You can't just erase him. He's what he is. There have been other other places where representation has been trying to make a stride. For example, I think the latest one has been in the talks is the James Bond role. They're like, oh, the next 007 should be female. And you know what? I kind of disagree with that. I was like, no. Like, I don't want the next James Bond to be a female. Like, I don't know if
I,
that, like, I'm being moronic about it, but
no, I can respect that. I would say the next James Bond could be female. Like, doesn't I don't want to attach should to it, but I would say if it is someone who is a female, that's fine. But if there's someone who I think, or if the casting people think is better and they happen to be male, I think that should be okay too. But if
Yeah,
you already decided that it should be a female, then you already removed anyone else from the running.
yeah.
Specifically for a character who used to be portrayed by a man. If you're going for a complete rewrite of the series and you're now saying that this is a female character, that's a whole other conversation. Nothing wrong with that, but then that's not the same James Bond. That's a different person in
and
many ways.
us saying out loud, it's like people would argue that's the same conversation people, that's the same argument you could make about the Little Mermaid. It's not gender, it's race, but it's kind of on similar lines, right? It's no longer the same, and it's like, I don't know, it's just it's like, you see where I'm
You
going.
and
It's
I
like,
we'll never know the motivation a lot of the times for the change behind some of these characters. If the person who's playing the Little Mermaid today was just genuinely the best person in the room who was auditioning, and they happen to be black, and they're like, you know what, this person is the best
yeah,
person. Forget the fact that they're black, or whatever. Let's cast them. That's fine. But if it's
because
specifically like we're calling out all black people, or we're doing a change in direction because we think that that's necessary, that's fine too. But
that's fine too.
that's a
Yes,
whole other revamp you're doing to the series.
because
And
James Bond also is like under conversation, right? They might cast someone who's African American, and to me that seems like no brainer. Like at that point, it shouldn't even be about race. It's like whoever can do justice to the role. Like I would be
yeah,
happy if they cast Tom Hardy or Idris Elba. Either one, like fantastic choices. I don't care what their race is because I know
right,
they just have the swagger that a role like that takes. You want to
right.
change it completely to a woman? You've got to massively rewrite what James Bond is.
Maybe that's the attempt that is happening right now, is to
Yeah,
actually massively
sure.
rewrite, and that's just a different James Bond. Then there's nothing wrong with it. It's just different.
Yeah.
But again, there's going to be people who are going to be up in arms about that one, about any change. So I think this was a good conversation just to see what's out there today, and to acknowledge that, a lot of change is good. I'd say most of what Hollywood is attempting to do today through these changes is good. It's positive. It's
It's
representative
important.
of a larger
Yeah.
population, especially in
Yeah.
the US and North America, where you have so much diversity. It's nice to see a lot of it depicted on the big screen.